How much does this cost? The dreaded question that always seems to come up. So let's face it head on and discuss how we are going to handle this. Now, over the years, I've learned that the sooner price is discussed in a conversation, the more of a focal point it becomes. If you've not fully uncovered your prospect's problem and determined exactly how your product or service can help them solve their issue, then your price is always going to seem too high unless you're the lowest priced product or service in the market. So the key to responding to this question is to establish value before you discuss price, always. So here's that dreaded question again. How much will this cost? Well, many salespeople shut down when they're faced with this question. Like literally, lock up. They stutter, stammer, hem-haw, and they literally lose confidence and control of the conversation completely. But we have to remember, this is where the rubber actually hits the road, and when the prospect will either give you the green light to move forward or say, thanks, but no thanks, I'm not interested. And far too often, salespeople feel uncomfortable talking about the price of their offer, fearing that their prospect will put the brakes on the buying decision if the price of their product or service is perceived as being too high. But this oftentimes is because they lack conviction themselves in the value of their own offer. They unconsciously flinch mentally and physically when responding to their customer, and this hesitation is quickly noticed. Now, over the years, I've learned that the sooner price is discussed in a conversation, the more of a focal point it becomes. So, if you've not fully uncovered your prospect's problem and determined exactly how your product or service can help them solve their particular issue, then your price is always going to seem too high, unless, of course, you're just the lowest price in the market. Now, the key to responding to this question is to establish value before you discuss price. Well, unfortunately, the vast majority of people who sell a product or service fail to achieve this, which means that their efforts to move the sale forward often end up in failure. Now, the most fatal mistake is to state the cost to your prospect too early in your sales conversation. So here's a few strategies to use during your future sales calls. First, if your prospect asks this question before you're prepared to respond, you need to defer. This sounds easy, but in the real world, it can be extremely challenging to execute. I've seen it time and time again. I can actually remember talking to a prospect about coaching services, and one of the first questions that came up was this question: how much do you charge? Right? So while the price of my coaching is fairly consistent from client to client, each person has a different and unique issues, and unless I discover what those issues are, then I can't know what services are needed and the length of time for which they're required. So I know that stating my fee too soon would likely cause my prospect to balk. So I said, well, it would be unfair for me to state a price without knowing more about your particular situation. Let me ask you a couple of questions and then we can discuss the investment. Fair? Well, of course it is. Your goal is to take control of the conversation, and you do that by asking high-value questions. Now, the specific questions you need to ask will vary depending on the type of solution needed. But it's essential to invest enough time learning about their particular situation so you can position your solution effectively. I mean, this sounds fundamental. However, after working with salespeople for a number of years now, I've discovered that most people do not ask enough high-value questions. In order to establish the value or worth of your solution, you need to learn how the problem they are facing affects them or maybe their company. This can be expressed in terms of sales, profits, churn, order accuracy, customer retention, satisfaction, etc. We have to embrace and learn to ask tough, high-value questions that will help you understand the impact of their problem. But most salespeople they're uncomfortable asking deep, probing questions because they believe that their prospect will think they are prying or being offensive. However, personal experience has taught me that most key decision makers respect sales professionals who ask tough questions. Once a prospect expresses a problem, you can ask questions like this: how is that affecting this? What impact is that having on customers? What is that costing you in terms of lost sales and profitability? How important is this compared to other problems you have on your plate right now? Let's discuss those problems as well. And if we had an appropriate solution, what would that mean to your company or even you personally? After you've determined the importance and the impact of a particular problem, you can then demonstrate the worth or value of your product or service to your prospect. Never before. Another challenge with this approach is that it does take time. It does. You have to exercise patience. You need to be able to clearly demonstrate why you and your offer is worth the investment. If you discuss price too soon, then everything you say afterwards is going to seem like you're trying to justify and validate the cost. Your customer will pick up on that. However, when you demonstrate how your offer will benefit their company or them personally, then your price will appear as a fair and equitable investment. Remember, there's a difference between cost and worth. Here's a simple comparison. A low-end entry-level car will get you from point A to point B. However, most of us would pay extra to do that same commute in a luxury vehicle of our choosing. So you have to help your prospects see the value and worth of your product, service, or solution, and cost becomes less of an issue. Thank you guys for hanging out with me this morning and watching. Coach Haynes.